Hello, everyone. My name is Théo Bertrand-Drira, and I'm a student at the ICMS Business School in Nancy, France. And I will present you my master thesis work on the organizational culture of the IFRS Foundation and if it's legitimate enough for making accounting norms. Thank you for letting me presenting this work at the ICMS 9th edition conference. So let's get started. Sorry for the sound. On the introduction, I just wanted to point out two things that are very important. The IFRS Foundation is playing a significant role nowadays in the international accounting settings context. And it took decades, but now it's a reality. And the norms that this foundation is making have great effect on the overall consolidated statement of the targeted companies, so the companies that use those norms to do their consolidated statement. And if it has so much importance, therefore we can address the legitimacy. It was the basis of my intellectual research. I wanted just for you to know how I came up with this idea. And for me, it's coherent and crucial to analyze such legitimacy in that kind of context. So let's get started with the research question basis. The first thing I did is do a comparative analysis between the governance of the IFRS and the FASB. FASB is the foundation based in America, otherwise in the United States, whereas IFRS is based in London. So in European Union, in Europe, I mean, because not anymore with the Brexit. So I did just a comparative analysis on the people, the governance, the way they are doing their norms and so on, their goal. And I understood that there's a difference in governance mostly, but not very in the goal or missions. It's more of a governance difference between the two. So it was to place the overall context of the international accounting. Therefore, I wanted to examine the governance of the IFRS and to understand its organizational culture in questioning the legitimacy. For me, it's pretty coherent to do it this way. We have to understand how a company works, or is it governed, to understand the legitimacy to making norms and laws. For the objectives, the objective of the study were firstly to understand the historical context of IFRS in the first place, so to see where it came from and what people were behind it on the basis, and of course, currently, who are they? So the profile and so on. And therefore, for the profile, it was to understand the influence of the people and the organization for the diversity of opinion, to understand that it's very important in legitimacy addressing context. And therefore, I wanted to investigate the impact of this organization regarding lobbying risks, because in every market, there's mostly lobbying risks, because there, of course, always personal interests behind everything. And most specifically, in such a context of accounting, where results of companies are involved. So there's, of course, interest for any type of company in this global context. So I wanted to address that. These were the objectives, and therefore I came up with two hypotheses. One is in two parts, and the second is alone. The first hypothesis is if that exclusive presence of politicians in the IFRS monitoring board restricts the inclusion of diverse opinions. And the second part was to see if that kind of governance is optimal in terms of organizational culture within IFRS. And the second hypothesis was to see that the exclusive representation of politicians in the IFRS board reduced the susceptibility to lobbying compared to FAT. because PAS, as a monitoring board, 95% composed of past and current experts in the field of accounting, whereas IFRS has purely politicians. That's explaining the hypothesis conception. For the methodology, I will just give some details here. So the research design was qualitative, and what I've done is using textual analysis of theories and experts interviews. And those analyses were based on the use of the Iramotech software, which is a French software, so it's pretty good. And this software highlights different things, and I use the dendrogram option and the tree of similarities. These tools help me to identify patterns and key concepts behind each theories, and then I blend in the information to understand very specific context and to understand the overall data I was getting from the interviews and the theories. Just for you to know, the theories framework I used is based on 7 theories. The theories of principal agent model, the iron cage, the legitimacy theory, the stakeholder approach to strategic management. And this is not, I want to point out that this is not I did not use the entire book of Freeman because it's very big. I used a paper he published in 2001, and he just updated its work, referring to its work basically, while referring to other researchers' work. And it was very interesting to use and more coherent for making corpuses out of this than out of a book of hundreds and hundreds of pages. And therefore, I used the open innovation theories, the financial expertise of directors, and the fraud triangle theories and fraud diamond theories, mostly for the lobbying hypothesis, as you may understand it. For the interviews, I wanted to point out that I used a semi-structured design, and this was based on 9 structured questions, and I did remove the first one because it was just to get to know the person, and as I respected the anonymity, I removed the question from the corpuses. Of course, it makes sense. And it was based mostly on experts in the international accounting fields, mostly academics, of course, and if I had the opportunity to the IFRS stakeholders, but I will get into this just right now, just after the parts on the validity and ethical consideration. For the corpuses, I respected the integrity of the textual analysis of the corpuses in the textual analysis. And why I did this, it's very important. I did not remove anything or remove some parts in theories just to help me get results. I used the entire papers of the theories without removing anything, except for the little things like the reluctance of words like and the and stuff, just to get a clear corpuses, but I did not remove any big piece of information. And as I've just mentioned, I respected the anonymity of the people when doing the corpuses of the interviews. And the limitation I wanted to point out was the difficulties to seek data. First thing, of course, it's obvious it was just selecting the right theories to the specific context. We are talking about the foundation, we are talking about lobbying, politicians, we are talking about sensitive subjects, and this is very complicated to in order to find some articles that are relevant enough. So I used mostly well-established theories based on governance stakeholders, as you saw in the previous slides. And of course, finding the right person to interview was difficult. And I will just dive into this in the next slide, which is here. This is a very specific context. So small group of people only can answer the question, and the availability of these people are limited. So it was the first difficulty. And the second difficulty for the interviews, it was, as a sensitive subject, this is a source of reluctance from people in accepting the interviews. Of course, this is a very specific and yet sensitive. I had some mail answer telling me that they did not want to answer this question, and it was because it was sensitive, and the people working at IFRS did not want to answer my question on the legitimacy of their company, of their foundation, of their entity. It makes sense. So it was a real difficult for me to get data. So mostly my data for the interviews and the corpuses on the interviews were based on the academics that were willing to discuss. Therefore, for the findings, just some few points here, is that the IFRS Monitoring Board is composed by, of course, an almost exclusivity of politicians. And this was influenced by a cultural heritage from the European Union, despite the fact, of course, because in Europe, we do like to have politicians at the head of entities that are making rules. And this is also about social expectation. There's an isomorphism, as we saw, between IFRS and FAS, but what it's explaining the board composition is the social expectation. People want politicians to rule in those kind of context in Europe. So that explains why. And politician exclusivity, it does not reduce lobbying risks for the foundation, while diversity does. Because the more people we have with more diversity and diversity in profiles helps to reduce the risks of lobbying, whereas an exclusivity of politicians does not reduce it. And it's mostly highlighted in the theories of fraud triangle, because they mostly just clearly have access to more information that, as we can say, normal people, which explain why it does not reduce lobbying sensitivity. They have access, they have the power to do whatever they can do if they want. So it does not, just globally. And therefore, considering the need of all stakeholders, a key concept to seek transparency and thus more legitimately. So according to those findings, the first hypothesis on the diversity of opinion is accepted, but the optimal way of the organizational culture is rejected, and the second hypothesis on the lobbying sensitivity is also rejected, as I've just mentioned. Therefore, for the implication, this have implication beyond the IFRS context for the professional field, any kind of professional field. They must pay attention to the monitoring board composition. It have to have a diversity of profile to allow innovation, to allow legitimacy, transparency to the people, to the employee. It's very important. And improving, yes, as I just say, it helps independence and legitimacy in context of norms and laws conceptualization. So it's also specific for this kind of market, but also for other things. And this also open a way for deeper academic researches on the IFRS governance. And for the further researches, maybe a deeper exploration on the EU initiative could be good, because as I mentioned earlier, the IFRS Foundation was based on an EU initiative. Maybe finding the historical piece of information could be good and could be great to analyze and understand the real basis and the real weights that EU have in the historical concept of IFRS. And also maybe a post-Brexit analysis of IFRS Foundation could be interesting, as we can understand how it does affect its inner organization and the way they work and the way they are doing their norms. And of course, its legitimacy, because it changed a lot of things. And developing also the interviews could be interesting. As I mentioned in the difficulties to seek data part, we need maybe to find more individuals willing to discuss. It's very difficult, but it could take time. But I think that we can do it so that we have more data to get and to put in the Iramatech software to have more clever, I can say, if I can say this, clever results maybe. So this concludes my work on this specific context. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'm available if you have any question. Thank you for letting me presenting my work for this ICMS 9th edition conference. Thank you for having me. Have a nice day.